6.2.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Welcome to Let's Talk, your weekly current affairs show with me, Hameed Chowdhury, and Akeel Halil.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, brother. You're listening to Salaam Radio on 106.2 FM, and also for our Luton listeners, Assalamu alaikum on Inspire FM. We're online at salaamradio.co.uk. You can also find us on social media at Salaam Radio and YouTube Live or via iOS and Android apps. We're always on air 24/7, 365, uniting all communities. We're going to be talking tonight about pot calling the kettle black, white privilege and a spade that is not a spade. And after the break, Trojan Horse to foster families. Are Muslims criminalized for doing their bit for Britain and British values? And if we get time and we get to it, huge rise in student Muslim leaders and their challenges. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Let me just give the numbers out.
Do your thing.
I think we're going to, inshallah, after last week, we're going to get loads of callers calling.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. So, if you want to get involved, especially we've got some great topics lined up today, do call us on 01733 602 133. That's 01733 602 133. And also text and WhatsApp us, and we do check the text and WhatsApp.
We do. I'm eagle-eyed. I'm on it. I've got the responsibility.
So do text or WhatsApp us on 07745 278 978. That's 07745 278 978. Jazakallah khair.
So I want to give a shout out to Brother Said who called us in last week.
Yeah, assalamu alaikum.
So I know you're listening. Feel free to call in again tonight.
Inshallah. And our international listeners, as
yes,
we've been told by the station
we
manager,
have been, haven't we? So I want to give a shout out to our brothers and sisters around the world, including Israel.
Including Israel. We got a lot of listeners from Israel.
Indonesia, Greater Manchester.
Netanyahu's listening.
Do I think Benjamin Netanyahu is listening? I think he may be. Yeah, why not?
I think secretly loves our show.
I think he loves your dulcet tones, my brother.
Exactly.
Obviously, we have people in America, across Europe listening to us. So, big hello, Salaam alaikum to everybody listening to our show. Please get involved in the conversation.
Yep, peace be on you, except if you're oppressing people. They're not. But peace be on you anyway.
There we go.
That nicely brings us into our first topic. But normally we ask how your week's been at this stage. But shall we just go straight into the topic?
Yeah, let's just go.
Because you're ill, and everyone can hear that probably.
Yeah, probably
on the radio.
Yeah,
so you're not going.
That was me. I thought I was sounding like Barry White. It's not working.
I was going to say you can get away with it this week because you can claim to be ill. I don't know about a few weeks.
Shots fired.
Shots fired. Anyway, like I said,
no pun intended. Can I just say?
So, pot calling the kettle black. That's a great title.
Oh, I have no idea who came up with that.
No idea whatsoever.
I know it's been coined for the show.
Coined for the show.
Can't my friend. It's been coined for the show. I don't know who would have done that, but no, it's great.
Yeah, and white privilege, a spade that is not a spade.
Spade that's not a spade.
Spade that's not a spade. Yeah, when is a spade not a spade?
Brother.
When is a spade not a spade?
When it's not a spade.
When it's not a spade. I think it's the colour. It's something to do with colour, isn't it?
There's multiple meanings to it, but yeah, that's definitely one of them. Yeah.
So anyway, does the US have a problem with guns? And this comes after a 273rd mass shooting in 275 days. Yes, you heard it correct. 273rd mass shooting in 275 days in the US. That's one mass shooting per day. So the one that's the one that happened recently, or that got international coverage, was the Las Vegas kind of massacre, bloodbath. Really, 58 killed,
utterly shocking.
Women, 22 men, and 500 plus wounded.
Yeah,
it's phenomenal.
Unbelievable numbers, and the lengths this person has gone through to carry out this attack is shocking. I mean, the numbers that you've just said there, it's genuinely really shocking. Have we got a technical issue or some description here?
No, I don't think so. I think our station manager's about walking here.
Yeah.
He says
brace yourself.
I have no idea because it's just buzz.
or station
Okay,
managers here for the rescue.
He wasn't
Big shout out to
he was-
Brother Garson.
Right, he's asking. Well, I have no idea what he's asking me, but anyway, we'll carry on.
Oh, I get it. Yeah. Oh, well, anyway, yeah. So where were we? So we got this person here, 64-year-old, identified as a U.S. citizen at the time, is Stephen Paddock.
Stephen Paddock, yep.
Who carried out this what has been reported as the worst
ever, yeah.
Worst tragic. No, the funny thing is, it was called the worst in US history, but actually it was in modern history. People have forgotten about the 1800s when you had the Native Americans who were literally wiped out. That was the worst, you know. But for some strange reason, it feels like America wants to forget about that.
Yeah, well, it tends to want to forget about everything that happened previously to the mass killing that's happened today.
I mean, it's just absolutely disgusting, shocking scenes. Just when the news broke, you've got a country music festival going on. And you know, it really defined the century we're living in, isn't it? Where you know, normally when you're watching TV and things like that, you'll see people standing there in a concert or a football match, and they always have their mobile phones in their hand and they're recording what they're watching, and they don't actually watch what they're supposed to be watching live. They're watching it through their phones. But in this instance, that actually allowed us to see what's happened there in first hand. And when you first hear the rapid fire, the continuous rapid fire, which, you know, if anybody who plays video games or maybe actually it has taken some sort of military training or anything like that will be able to appreciate, when there's no break in the fire, it's utterly shocking. And then when you hear the you know, the descriptions of the people who were involved, when they say, oh well, you know, it was going on for 4 or 5 minutes, some said 15 minutes, and that he paused when he was changing his clip, and that gave them a chance to, you know, stand up and run, you know, duck, hide, and carry on going all the way through. Even to that end, people were, you know, climbing over fences, you know, they were, you know, because it was an open country music festival, they had barbecues which were burning at the time. People were stepping or, you know, using their hands to you know, elevate themselves over these fences and things like that. People were just running for their lives. And you know, when I watched the clip and listened to the sounds of that rapid fire, I mean, I was like, is this a film? I mean, it was like, is this part of the set? I mean, no one got it straight away. If you watch some of the clips, you got the artist there at the front doing their thing, and it's like it's all part of the, you know, it's all part of the set. Something that's going on. And I watched an interview with a few British soldiers who were off duty, who were a part of the crowd as well, and they were saying when they heard it, they instantly knew that it was, you know, it was you know, someone was using a gun, or it was some sort of ammunition being used. So, but that's to the trained ear, obviously, isn't it? But then, as the story developed, and then it's like, okay, there's been a shooting, and it was, you know, as it went on, so it's like, okay, a few people have been injured, and there's like all these people running away and things like that. And as the death toll started to mount up, I genuinely started to anticipate, okay, right, so how is this? How are people going to? You know, what are people going to call this? And this is where we're going towards a spade, right? You know, what are people going to call this? And suddenly it was like 5 people killed, 10 people killed, 20 people killed. By the time I think it was 20 or 30 people who killed, Trump was awake. And he was tweeting. And the thing is, if you don't follow the 40...
Well, he only did one tweet, didn't he?
Yeah, so I was saying, if you don't follow President Donald Trump of the United States of America on Twitter, you won't understand what I'm going to say next, which is that every time something happens, or whether that's a domestic policy of some description, or whether he's fallen out with the judicial person, whether he's had a disagreement with Democrats, whether he's had something to say about Rocket Man, aka Kim Jong-un, or Iran, or anything like that, in the following morning, the early hours of the morning, he tweets, right? And he tweets regularly. He's quite open. It's, you know, for a lot of people, he's you know, cannon fodder. For other people, he's quite literally amusing. But the point is, he says what he feels through his tweets. What really surprised me was, like you said, there was one tweet, and he didn't call it what it was. So this, by all intents and purposes, everybody on this side of the planet, and quite a lot of people in America, to be fair to them as well, this was a domestic terrorist attack. And what we're shocked about, and I know we're going to go through this, and I hope some of our listeners get involved as well, is nobody is calling it what it is. And the problem we've got here is some of the terminology used. So, for example, domestic terrorism in America, so the federal law defines it as the following: that is the unlawful use of force and violence against persons or property to intimidate or coerce a government, the civilian population, or any segment thereof in furtherance of political or social objectives. That's one of the meanings.
Right.
And because
but do you think it's not called a terrorist attack because of the fact that they haven't found a motive?
I was just going to say, in other words, regardless of how deadly the attack is, motive is the key factor in designating an act as terrorism. And so far, they haven't found a motive.
Yeah, they found some numbers.
They found, sorry?
Some numbers.
They found plenty of numbers. They found plenty of numbers. But that's one half of the issue I've got here. Okay, so spade is spade. We're still sticking with this, right? My other problem I have here as well is it was almost within the first 24 hours, this person was beginning to become humanized.
Yes.
You know, so they were talking about his career. They were talking about how he was a successful businessman, how he was a millionaire, how he lived in a wealthy retirement suburb, how he owned multiple cars, how he had property, all these things. So people were starting to have a picture of how this guy was normal.
Yeah.
And he had no grievance, but he had access to firearms.
Yes.
So we have a few narratives playing here. So we don't have domestic terrorism. We just have mass killing. An act of pure evil is what Donald Trump called it. Then they start humanizing this person, and then they start talking about, oh, well, you know, the guns, it looks like they might have been modified, and so on and so forth. And I genuinely was taken aback, because I instantly, as a British Muslim, I was thinking to myself, hold on a minute.
Are you saying that if it was anyone other than Stephen Paddock or a middle-aged or a white person, it would be almost instant that this is a terrorist attack? I mean, as humanizing, you know, we spoke about Damon Smith on the last week's show, where, you know, he was described as a former altar boy. Straight away, you know, reducing the impact of the kind of evil that this person could have spread. So you're saying that it because of the fact that he was a white person, you know, was the reason why that it's not called a terrorist, or at least there isn't been that same level of scrutiny as it would be if it was you know, Omar Mateen, for example, who was the Orlando shooter in 2016, where he killed 49 people and wounded 13.
Or same thing you could say about Dylan Roof. Dylan Roof's exactly the same thing. Yeah. He didn't get called. He didn't get called. You know, a terrorist. He was called insane or you know, or an outlier. You know, it was like this guy was. You know, he wasn't part of the, you know, norm. But he, you know, he wasn't this. And the other problem, and I am, yes, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. And I'm sorry, but that's where all the roads are going.
Dylan
you know,
was should have been a terrorist because his motive was clear.
Yes, that's right.
His motive was political, so that was a clear cut. That was a textbook.
Exactly, it should have been terrorist. But don't forget, I think it's really important.
And so was Damon Smith in the UK.
Correct.
You know,
I think it's to add to this as well. Is President Barack Obama also didn't call the Charleston massacre terrorism either. You know, I think it's also important to stress here as well. You know, that there is a popular thought in America, which is that people with, and this is what really disturbed me when I was doing a lot of. So we have all this happening all of the weekend, and I thought, okay, we'll do research for the show, etc. And what I came across really disturbed me, and it's the following, which is that there's a popular thought in America that people with foreign names and people with dark skin funding foreign ideologies, you know, they're the terrorists. No one else can be the terrorist. There's no American terrorist.
Yeah.
It was like the further I was digging, the more I was seeing that I can't seem to be able to point my finger at. Like, what was that chap's name? Timothy McVeigh.
Yes.
The guy who used the bomb and he bombed the building, killed all those people. 195 people or something like that passed away.
Yeah.
Wasn't called a terrorist.
No. Well, I think I don't know. I mean,
not in the way we would deem him to be a terrorist. No, he wasn't. You know, and so you know, we're in a situation now where a few things have happened here. So we're not going to call him a terrorist. We're going to say he was a wealthy, normal guy. We can't find a motive. And now suddenly the issue has turned back on to guns. It's like, well, the saying, which is the popular saying, which is guns don't kill people, people do. Well, I don't buy that, actually. We live in
the other dimension of this is that that these people generally get arrested alive. As opposed to somebody with a different colour skin, they generally get shot dead. At that moment.
Well, in Paddock's case, obviously, they say that he killed himself. And apparently, he 2 weeks prior to this, he had actually hired a hotel in a different location.
Yeah, he was staking out. He was staking out
at a different music event. So this was obviously, he planned this extensively. I mean, it was meticulously done.
Right. But just to kind of home in around this. So as SARS show, we said this is 273rd mass shooting, 275 days. 310 million guns are owned in the US. 40% of the US households own guns. Does America have a problem with guns?
Well, I'll give you a start. In 2016, right, a country of 323 million people, America had 112.6 guns per 100 people.
Wow. More guns per person.
What?
Well, I mean, the US has 16 times more gun-related cases than Germany. Just put it in perspective.
And also to add here, I mean, I'm sure this isn't surprising. I mean, no other country has even 100 guns per person, right? And deaths by gun in America are the highest rates in the world. Yet nothing changes.
Nothing changes because of organizations like the NRA, who the National Rifle Association, who are kind of anti any kind of regulation, and who actually gave $30 million to Trump for his campaigning donations, and have have given hundreds of thousands of dollars to congressmen in donations. And they don't do that out of the goodness of their heart. They do it to maintain a certain political control, especially around any attempt at trying to regulate guns in the US.
Yeah, and I think to add to that as well, I mean, status quo is really important to the NRA. And if you saw the video footage of Trump, I think he was going to be flying to Vegas to see it firsthand.
Right.
And he was with Melania Flotus. Big shout out to Flotus. And she, and he was questioned about it, and he said, "Now is not the time to talk about this."
That's a typical Fox News kind of response.
And you're like, that's strange. Surely now is the time to talk about this.
Well, if it was any other if it was mass killing by anyone else, and the dimension of the conversation was different, then now would have been the time to talk about anything else. But when it comes to this conversation, and Obama faced the same issues when he was, I think it's 366 mass killing in 365 days, when he was faced by this constantly going to places where there was mass killings, he was he was prevented to some extent by the lobbying by the NRA as a lobbying group from taking on this issue. And I think he tried to, but they're just too powerful, and they're powerful irrespective of the lives of the people in America. 1,300 children under 17 die each year through gun shot wounds. 53% of homicides, 38% of suicides, 6% of unintentional deaths occur through guns.
Shocking. I mean, in the UK, you have 1 in 100 chance of being involved in a violent crime, but a 1 in 10,000 chance of being involved in a violent crime involving a weapon. But in America, you have 1 in 250 chance of being involved in a violent crime, but greater than 1 in 10,000 chance of being involved in a crime involving a gun, not just a weapon. It's just not. The stats, the more you dig on this subject, the more you look into this, it's just mortifying. It's absurd. And then when you're reading about what's actually happening, and you're listening and reading the comments of some of the users in America, and they just don't get it. And it's just like they rather. They will go out their way to defend having a gun and completely forget about what's happening. It's just, It's really, really shocking.
Well, I think in the US, I think this is. I mean, this is a prime case of where indoctrination has taken place. You know, for a long time, the American people have been fed this idea, and through not directly, but through subtle means, by Hollywood in many ways, and through other means, that, you know, any talk about guns and about regulation, about, you know, is an attack on their right to bear arms, their constitution. And I think for most people, that is a no-go zone. Even though, you know, I mean, I did a Google earlier, and first page, you know, 10-year-old kills older brother, 6-year-old kills a 4-year-old older brother, 3-year-old shoots 1.5-year-old baby, 5-year-old shoots brother with a handgun, 5-year-old girl shoots 8-year-old brother, and just this month, a toddler shoots a 2-year-old brother with a gun, and a 7-year-old shoots and kills a 2-year-old cousin. I mean, even though there is this again and again and again, you know, where gunshot wounds are only second to car crashes, you know, in as a leading cause of death for children in America. And while the car safety is taken seriously and everything is done to try and minimize and limit that, because, you know, this is not just a death of an individual, it's an impact on the entire community, the family, and the wider network and society. Gun control is not dealt in the same way because of organizations like the NRA, which are extremely powerful, which, you know, a popular phrase for them is, I'll give you my gun when you pry it out of my cold dead hands. You know what I mean? I don't know. What can you say?
Wow.
What can you say when the lobbying group, I mean, where does democracy lie when a lobbying group can hold the entire country hostage just because they've got money? You know, hold them hostage so that they can't pass laws and regulations which would save lives.
Yeah, I mean, I harken back to what I said previously about guns don't kill people, people do. Well, in fact, if you look at the UK versus United States of America, if two people had an argument here and became violent, and the only thing they had access to were maybe a knife or their hands or whatever, chances are they may not kill each other, okay? But if you have access to a gun, chances are you're going to kill yourself. So if the guns are taken out of the equation, how does that not make sense? 1, 2, why would any citizen, any normal citizen, need an assault rifle? That just doesn't make sense to me. And then, moreover, why does a citizen of any country think or feel for any reason whatsoever they should have an arsenal at home? You know, I have a lot of.
Had 43. Firearms.
And I've mentioned this to you before, and I mentioned it off air as well. I have a lot of American friends, and, you know, they often show images of some of their arsenal, and it's just utterly shocking. You know, these people have semi-automatic, fully automatic weapons. I mean, over 100 guns.
You can buy a handgun in the US for less than you can buy a Chromebook.
That's just shocking. You
know, or a semi-automatic rifle, or a rifle for less than a MacBook Pro. I mean, you know, it's shocking.
For us, you know, it's illogical.
Yes,
it's not part of our culture, and it's certainly one thing we have learned over the years here is America has an addiction to guns. It has an addiction to the Second Amendment.
Do you think it has an addiction not just to guns, but to violence and you know, I mean, there is all this violence and killing, not just home but abroad. America has spread
There's definitely an argument for that.
And arms. I mean, one of the biggest sellers of arms in the world is the United States.
Well, in fact, I'd say it's number one.
It's number
it's number one. I think to add to that as well, then would be, I mean, I concur with what you're saying. You know, you know, the NRA, obviously they're powerful and things like that, but it's the psyche. It's like, you know, you'll speak to your American friends and they'll say, oh, what are you doing at the weekend? And they'll say, well, I'm taking my 4-year-old shooting. You know, I'm going to show him how to do this. I'm going to show him to that. It's like, you know, it just doesn't make sense. And it's like, until they can separate themselves from that being normal part of their life, this is going to carry on. If America has to accept that atrocities like this, which are domestic terrorism, are going to happen forever until they look at themselves in the mirror and understand they don't need these weapons.
The American people are held hostage by organizations like the NRA and are indoctrinated into thinking that, you know, people like the NRA, who have everything to gain in this, are know better, you know. And I mean, I remember reading an article a while back, actually, a few years ago, where a 4-year-old gets given a child gun, a real gun, but designed for a 4-year-old child.
Yeah,
and he ends up shooting his younger brother.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just it's incomprehensible that gun manufacturers would manufacture guns for a 4-year-old child.
Yeah, and you know, brother, one of the common deaths in gun-related deaths in America are actually the instructors for children. They often get killed.
Right.
Because of an inadvertent firing of some description. It's very common, believe it or not, it's actually really common. The kid will have a gun in his hands or whatever he's been taught, loses control, accidentally kills a tutor. It's common. I mean, it's just like, well, why?
Well, I mean, I tell you what, 91% of firearm deaths on children under 14 worldwide occur in the US. I mean, this is going back to what you're saying, and this is the problem, that there are needless deaths happening. These people who can go on to become, you know, Steve Jobs or people who make a difference in the world, people who are active, you know, can make a massive are just being needlessly killed because of a political pressure group, you know, with deep pockets.
Yeah.
It's disgusting.
Yeah, and like you mentioned earlier on, you know, about Obama, you could visibly see his frustration when he tried to tackle this, and now they've got a Republican on each side. It's just not going to change.
Akeel, I'm going to have to hold you there because we've got 10 seconds to go. Inshallah, do come back and we'll carry on the conversation. Assalamu alaikum.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
الله أكبر، الله أكبر، لا إله إلا الله. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم، وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت محمدا الوسيلة والفضيلة وابعثه مقاما محمودا الذي وعدته اللهم آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار اللهم بك نحيا وبك نموت وإليك المصير رضينا بالله ربا وبالإسلام دينا وبمحمد صلى الله عليه وسلم نبيا ورسولا.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته وبسم الله. قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم دع ما يريبك إلى ما لا يريبك. That leave that which puts you in doubt for that which does not put you in doubt.
Broadcasting 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. This is Salaam Radio.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Welcome back to Let's Talk. Before we went on break, we were talking about pot calling the kettle black, white privilege, and when a spade is not a spade. And we talked about the fact that does America have a problem with guns and their love affair with guns, and and you would agree that I think there's a major crisis in American society, in American psyche, when it comes to guns and gun control. But now we're going to go on to the next part of our show, and that is a Trojan Horse to foster families. Are Muslims criminalized for doing their bit for Britain and British values? So more often than not, we this idea of British values comes up, and Muslims aren't doing enough, I think, is the idea that gets pushed out. And I just want to pick up on what happened about 3 years ago with Trojan Horse. Or as some people call it, a Trojan hoax. Now, what happened is that in Birmingham schools were impacted by this, where a letter, anonymous letter, was given to the government about what is called an Operation Trojan Horse, where a plot by Muslim groups was to install governors at schools and take over schools. So this was the kind of background, and this could be a movie, quite honestly.
It was utterly shocking at the time. It was gripping as well.
Yeah, and it's Michael Gove, who was the education secretary at the time, bit on that as hard as he could. He asked Peter Clark to take over and look into this, who is the counter-terrorism chief, head of counter-terrorism at the time. So you can see how the narrative was being formed. Now, just before that, all of these schools, and including the one at the center of this Park View Academy, was considered as an outstanding school.
By Ofsted.
By Ofsted, of which the chief of Ofsted, Sir Michael Wilshaw, said that all schools should be like this. Because it went from a failing schools, and this wasn't just Parkview, other schools as well that got caught up by this, from failing inner city schools predominantly within Muslim community, to within a very, very short space of time to 75% GCSEs pass rate.
Phenomenal.
Phenomenal success, and that success was largely driven by the traditional method of teaching, which Gove was always championing as an education secretary. He said we need to go back to the traditional way of teaching, and that is the way we're going to have success. And this is what they did. They took that idea, they implemented that idea throughout the school. Ties must be worn, school uniform, zero tolerance for swearing, zero tolerance for truancy. All those things were in place, and suddenly you saw a massive increase. And schools like Parkview had a waiting list, where every parent wanted to get their kid into that school because of the standards, because of the GCSE rates and the outstanding Ofsted rating that it got, and other schools as well.
And quite clearly the efforts by the teachers and the governors, everybody working together.
Everybody working together. I mean, there was this, I remember at the time somebody was saying that, at the end of the day, if your child is going to a school, and this goes for all schools, including schools in Peterborough, if your child is going to a school, then you have a vested interest to hold that school to account.
Yes.
You have a vested interest to go in and ask the teachers what's going on. Why is the school not doing better than it should be? Why is my child not doing better than he should be? What do I need to do? What do I need to do to improve my child in that school? And that's exactly the ethos that they were instilling in these schools. They were encouraging, on the one hand, they were encouraging the children to do better, to aim higher, not have a glass ceiling, to go further than they could even conceive of going. You know, aim for the stars, at least you hit the moon. And on the other hand, the parallel approach was to encourage the parents to come on board, to be stakeholders in the education, and be drivers in raising the standards for the school. And all this, driven by grassroots Muslim organizations, was something that, according to Peter Oborn, who is a writer in Middle East Eye, he said that this was this. So the background to this is it was that, and now that 3 years on, we find that all allegations have been dropped. Yeah, the hoax, the letter was a hoax, and this attempt to undermine Muslims driving education and driving improvements in schools was an attempt, according to Peter Oborn, as an anti-Muslim ideological concoction. This is what it was, driven by Michael Gove, who was the Home Secretary at the time, a neocon, a lot of people would say.
Education Secretary, you mean?
Education Secretary, sorry. Theresa May was the Home Secretary, and she attacked him for not doing better with the Islamist plot. I mean, you can see the narrative that was forming at the time. So he was the Education Secretary, and he was backed by Cameron, and it was driven and added by a group of well-placed media henchmen, and it just took these three ingredients to come together to completely disrupt not only the schools in Birmingham, the undermine the teachers who got Tahir Alam, who got a lifetime ban, first one ever by the education Department of Education, where this all is all shown to be a hoax now, it was. So ultimately what it boils down to is this idea that Muslims are not or cannot be tolerated to be leading in any area of British society.
And yet, by the same token, if we are to make a difference or have an impact within this society and the communities that we live in, we need to be active citizens. So when we are trying to be active citizens, when we are trying to educate our children, so on and so forth, we have these situations where they literally decimated faith schools, Islamic faith schools at that particular time. Exactly, just schools. They were just run by Muslims.
What was happening was that this idea that if you and we've talked about this, if you want your child to do better at school, you have to be a stakeholder in his education.
Yeah.
You can't just be a bystander. You can't just be at home. You drop your kid off in the morning and he or she comes back in the evening and that's sufficient for you. No, you have to be an active participant in their education. And this is what they were driving. This people like going up and down the country driving this idea that you you need to get involved, be a parent governor, get involved, push the school to do better. That was the drive and that was the message, and that I think was something that could not be tolerated by these what can all be described as Islamophobes, people who cannot see Muslims appearing to do well in any area of British society. And this is why I think the question is being asked, is that are British Muslims who are doing their bit for Britain and British values being criminalized? I mean, after all, democracy can only work. Democracy can only work if people are participating in the democratic process.
Everyone.
If we leave it to a few at the top, which these Etonians would like that.
Yes,
they would like to be left alone to make the decisions and the masses just follow. They like that. The masses just pay the taxes while they go and enjoy the windfalls from that. So, but we cannot allow that to happen because we live in a democracy and one person, one vote. We have a right to hold hold our MPs to account, and we have a right to hold the government to account. And in the same way, we have a right to hold any kind of institution that is supposed to be working for, in this case, our children, to account.
What do you think, listeners? I mean, Brother Hameed is passionately spoken just there. Please call the studio with your opinions on 01733 602 133, or you can text WhatsApp us on 07745 278 978.
I mean, the other thing is, quite honestly, when this whole thing came out, and this Trojan horse letter surfaced, Birmingham Council, they obviously did their inquiry, and they within a very short space of time, they said there is no plot, there is nothing like that happening. But Michael Gove, just completely disregarded that.
Oh, he went with it. They
went with it.
They all went with it. It was like, oh, we're following due process. Well, come on.
No, well, I mean, Peter Clark, who is an anti-terrorism, if you've got a hammer, then everything looks like a nail. And so he all he does, he spends.
Is that a Clarkson quote?
Yeah, but all he does, spends his whole day looking at terrorism and legislation and terrorism related stuff. So to him, the whole world is about that. And quite honestly, a lot of people in Peter Oborn's article, and those people who can go and read it on Middle East Live, very good, excellent article to read. He talks about how Peter Clark actually never left the council room number 9 all the time he was there, forming his report. He never was once stepped into the schools that were being accused. Never once spoke to any of the teachers or the parents or the children. And yet he was charged with coming up with this report, which initially there was leaked, to add fuel to the fire. Stuff was leaked where he was quoted as saying that this was the case. And then later on, when the actual report came out, he said that there was no evidence. When everything dies down,
That's
now
right.
look, now these charges have been dropped against all these teachers. The All Parliamentary Education Committee has found no evidence to support what was being advocated at the time by Gove and his henchmen. But there's no media coverage.
No, of course there isn't.
Not a single media paper has picked up and said, maybe in page 55 in some bottom corner somewhere, just to sort of do a tick box exercise. But in reality, what was at the time when this came out,
wall to wall coverage. It was everywhere.
Absolutely,
yeah. And I recall, many other radio stations, and there was, topic, discussions online, and there's forums, and everybody had an opinion about this. And yet now we have a situation where these people have lost their livelihoods.
That's
they
right.
were scapegoated. The community's lost out. The children are lost out. The idea, what they originally wanted to be enforced in the schools to raise those standards has been lost out.
Yep.
And I recall you saying to me that now these particular schools are back to failing again.
They are failing. Yeah, they are failing. Year on year, their results are failing. Whereas they were improving. And as said, Michael Wilshaw, who was the Ofsted chief, he said that all schools should be like this. Only to then take on the inquiry, lead it, and put all these schools under special measures. What happened in that short space of time? Going from saying that all schools should be like this to saying no, they are in special measures now.
Yeah.
It was a witch hunt. It was a politically driven,
without a shadow of a doubt. And we've often said this. One of the reasons why it's not in the mainstream news at the moment, it's not a story that's going to sell anymore now.
No. But the damage is done. Take the example of the Foster case, where the Times headline news was a Christian child forced into a Muslim foster care with a Muslim foster care family. This idea that we had education on the one hand, and now we have anyone wanting to open their homes and their hearts to children who are suffering in the care system, and saying, look, that every child matters, every child deserves a home, every child deserves love and attention. Now basically what they're saying is that unless you're Muslim.
And the shocking element to this story as well was, again, like you said, fuel, adding fuel to the fire. This went everywhere, just like the Trojan Horse story. And people were asking, well, hold on, why is a Christian girl staying with a Muslim family?
Christian girl, when did the lady never come come into the
exactly.
equation.
But you know, there's hundreds of Muslim children who, for whatever reason, are in foster care throughout the UK who are not with Muslim parents or carers, and similarly, there should be no difference. And then when it was reported, they were saying she wasn't allowed to wear the cross, the crucifix around her neck. She couldn't
they didn't speak English.
They didn't speak English.
I mean, this is
she couldn't eat certain types of meat. She had to do certain things, blah blah. And the other really disturbing element to this as well, I recall, was the image that they used of the so-called mother in this case, the foster carer, right? They put a veil, digitally put a veil across her face when the original image had her face wide open.
No, it wasn't even her.
And
it was just an image from stock,
right?
It was a stock image.
The other element we've got here as well now is, just like this Trojan Horse case, we now have a situation where the girl herself is now saying, you know, that she misses those carers. You know, and when the council have gone in, so the Tower Hamlets, Borough Town has gone, they didn't find anything untoward. The judge, Hatun Sapnara, said the girl, you know, she was happy that the relationship they had was warm and appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, actually, quite honestly, the council at the time, I mean, there is due diligence and they do go through a whole set of checks, you know, and the council at the time was saying there is this story is a no story. It is, I mean, it stinks of racism. You know, to sort of say that, oh, just because they happen to be non-white or happen to be Muslim, they can't speak English. I mean, what is that?
It's ridiculous. I mean, just to quote the local authority, I mean,
by these papers.
The local authority, you know, said, you know, they were satisfied itself that the foster carer has not behaved in any way which is inconsistent with their provision of warm and appropriate care for the child. I mean, what more do you want?
Yeah. I mean, again, this is the media's attempt at trying to remove Muslims from being engaged in the British society
and being normal people.
On the one hand, you know, we're constantly told, which is again a lie, that we are not engaged in British society and we're not upholding British values. And on the other hand, when somebody does that, well, I mean, actually, Muslims are doing that every day of the week, but when somebody's seen to be doing that in you know, raising standards in education, taking care of a child who's in care, being sent pillar to post, when they are doing that, then suddenly they're demonized as well, and criminalized,
absolutely. No,
I don't know what's going on here, Akeel.
I'll tell you what, one of the elements, a personal opinion anyway, is it's like you said, you know, whenever we're trying to be that normal British citizen, whenever we're trying to partake in the local society or the national, you know, the fabric, whether we want to be a personality of some description or whether we want to be, you know, for example, I know I speak about him regularly, you know, is our dear Mayor Sadiq Khan. You know, he is literally, you know, you put your head above the parapet. I mean, he's getting shot continuously, and if you use a similar analogy here, anybody who's trying to better themselves within society, it's like we have no compassion. You do.
You have to constantly prove yourself.
And you know, it's like we've been demonized, where we're not compassionate, or like you said, we're not patriotic enough. You know, all these things, and like you said, we have to work twice, thrice as hard as our counterparts, right? Only to be at a level pegging field with the rest of them. But then if they step out in any way, shape or form, whether that's being legitimately or illegitimately, we're shot down.
I mean, take Sadiq Khan for example. If he goes to a mosque, it's suddenly like, oh, hang on a second, what's going on here?
He shouldn't be in there.
He shouldn't be in there. And he can go to any temple or church or whatever.
Synagogue.
But if he was to ever miss an appointment or because of his other engagements, not go to one, suddenly he'll be like, oh, why didn't he go to that? You know, it's just constantly under the spotlight by the Islamophobes, by those people who don't like Muslims being in any position of authority. I mean, it's a tough gig.
It is,
and it's tough for Muslims. And you know, due respect to those people who just plough through. That's what's needed.
I mean, you got the case of Fatima Manji when she was reporting on Channel 4. We had terror attack. I think it was in France, the Nice attack. At the time, she wears a hijab. She's probably one of the most prominent Muslim women on television anyway, who wears a hijab, and she's just doing about her daily job, and you got Kelvin McKenzie calling her out on it.
Or Michelle Hussein, who interviewed Aung San Suu Kyi. You know, and she said, "Oh, why didn't somebody tell me a Muslim's going to interview me?" You know, it's just a kind of you know, and yet we didn't have a massive outcry. You know, ordinarily the papers will be, you know, she was still at the time, not anymore, and a great show to Oxford for removing the freedom of city from her. But the point is there is this idea that Muslims, you know, if they start to grow and get politically engaged, socially engaged in every other area, suddenly their past has been told by these Islamophobes and it's been brought out.
Yeah, and I think what I want to also add to that as well is this story again about these the foster parents as well. Ipso didn't even investigate.
No.
They actually said we're not going to investigate this,
right, yeah.
because it's going to affect the child. But hold on, that's already it's already happened. Everything's already happened here.
Exactly.
Again, it was another story, a story that became something that it didn't need to, and it was it's just like Trojan Horse. It was just something to sell the newspapers, to sell a narrative, all on the front pages, wall-to-wall network coverages, and then when it's been disproved, no one's talking about it.
I mean, should the media be allowed to get away with it? There's almost like
of course
a concerted effort by all the media outlets in the UK to attack Muslims. I mean, should they be allowed to get away with this? I mean, we need more, or we need IPSO to have more teeth.
We do. Well, I think that should be disbanded. There should be an independent, a genuinely independent
there should be,
watchdog, like Ofcom is, right? Yeah. Who's completely independent, who actually goes through this. And until we have these checks and balances in place, we're never going to get any sort of discourse. You know, there'll be nothing there for them. At the moment, they have nothing to worry about. I mean, you've got a situation here where you've got print media and digital media reporting about about a foster carer family, right? And now, and the regulator is saying we're not gonna do anything. Yeah. I mean, it just stinks, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, we wanted to. I know we don't want to end on a.
We're not going to end on a bad note, are we?
No. But I mean, the other story we had was talking about how young people are pushing through the ceiling and getting into positions of leadership, and yet even they are being attacked left, right, and centre. So take the example of Zamzam Ibrahim, who is now 23-year-old, is elected as president at University of Salford Students' Union. We have Ilyas Nagdi, who is a Muslim NUS officer who represents 1 million students from black and ethnic minorities background. Haim Gai, who is the NUS women officer at King's College. And you know, the list goes on, where young people at universities are moving through into positions of leadership and fun. But the sad thing about that article that is written there, I mean, that's something to celebrate.
It is.
That's something to celebrate. But each one of those has a story to tell. Because in each one's case, there are people whose sole job it is to trawl through their Twitter feeds. To, you know, they might have said something 15 years ago.
Yes, that's right.
As young, you know, naive person, and suddenly that's brought to the forefront. This is what they believe, and this is what happened with Malia Bhutai. You know,
that's right.
Who was the head of the NUS, you know, president of the NUS, and as soon as she became president, suddenly it was like,
she had right-wing websites and all these people chasing her, and when you read through these stories individually of the people you've just mentioned, you're absolutely right. I mean, they're going through the tweets and things like that. They're getting published, and there's no context there, and so they're being demonized.
That's right.
And all this to discredit them, and so they get removed out of post. Right. But do you know what? It's really, really heartwarming to see that we're not people, you know, they're younger than us, both of us, obviously, right? And so there's the next generation, right? It's very heartwarming to see that we have people who are going to stand up, who are saying enough is enough. Whatever comes our way, we're going to take it because we need to make a stand.
That's what you need to do. That's what's needed.
That is exactly what is needed, and you know, I have to take my hat off to them.
Yes.
And say it's great what they're doing. No. And it's a fantastic number of stats as well, which we've got there across different unis. So many Muslim, sisters and brothers are all really getting involved. And, you know, it's really great. It's just absolutely fantastic. You know, there's stories are really, they're sad, but it's like you're also expected it.
Yes.
I mean, the thing is that there is always this idea, I mean, this the racism and all of this stuff, that anyone from ethnic minority, anyone tries to come up, tries to get bigger than what they expected or surpasses the pigeonhole that they've put in, and suddenly it's like ceiling, absolutely comes down and they stop from doing it. So hats off to these guys. They are having trouble, they have challenges, but that's what makes us stronger. It does. I think they are an inspiration for many people. If you really want to have just, find us to school, we're talking about, how young, Muslims and young, really taking ownership of their situations in education, where food is, and it's really, really impressive to see. I'm glad we didn't finish on story. We're talking about this is really, really good. I mean, this is great, and it's just that I think, again, there is so much pressure on these guys. One of them, Ali Al-Milani, who is a politics student, he talks about how he, he's a US vice president for English development, but he talks about how, as a politics student, he gets trouble all sorts of things. As soon as he mentions something like Hamas in the article, he knows that he's going to get put on one side and prove himself. Anyone else would get away with it, anyone else that would be fine. And this is the problem people are Muslims, and this is what Jews went through, quite honestly, for a long time in Europe. There was a lot of distrust, a lot of misunderstanding, and again, they were pushed down, but that's maybe, what was what makes you stronger. And I think, inshallah, that's probably a good place to stop, right? Yes. What are the things that makes you stronger? I think inshallah. Okay, we've got 40 seconds to go. For listening, I think we had a great show. But the whole spectrum of different things all related. Yes, they were. We talk about crime or how there's white privilege, white person that crime doesn't get categorized in the same way as somebody else. We talk about how in Britain there are, and we know, and we cover this very often on the show, that there are, people in certain political power which are undermining Muslim growth, but again, we see that Muslims are growing. Yes. So Jazakallah, listening brothers, sisters, and we have a good weekend, and we'll see you next week. Assalamu alaikum. Stay tuned to Salaam Radio after this short ad break.